When I say Red Dead, many people's first thought turns to Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption 2. The game had the biggest opening weekend in the history of entertainment, with over $725 million in revenue in just 3 days, according to Business Wire. The gritty western captivated the gaming world and is rivaled only by Grand Theft Auto when it comes to Rockstar. When I hear the name Red Dead, I immediately think of its humble beginnings with Red Dead Revolver, released in 2004, produced by Rockstar Games themselves. This game holds so much nostalgic value for me, and I remember playing it numerous times on my PlayStation 2 all those years ago. I thought I would take a look back at the classic that started it all and see if it still holds up today. One of my biggest worries when doing something like this is to ruin the illusion I created in my mind. I remember some fast-paced action to go along with small free roam areas, which was rare at the time in gaming for the most part. Anytime you got to explore even small areas, it felt special. I remember thinking how cool it was in this first Spider-Man movie game that you could swing around the city in one of the first missions. When I booted on the game and heard the intro music, it really started to come back to me. That opening theme filled me with an immense sense of nostalgia. The game starts you off with a scene in an honest piece of land. A man comes home and explains to his wife that he hit gold and that soon they'll never have to worry about anything ever again. Your pa gives you his old revolver after explaining he had his specially made. You go through a quick tutorial on shooting. To be honest, the mechanics feel fairly smooth. You press L1 to raise your weapon and R1 to shoot. Quite straightforward, of course. Aiming feels a little clunky, and this is something you'll notice throughout the entire game. You'll become accustomed to it over time, but that strange feeling never goes away completely. It is worth noting that the game does look pretty damn well for 2004. Scenery is fully developed, and the polygonal style is just something that was standard at the time. Considering how much more detailed it was in the N64, at the time it was pretty pristine. It is certainly not anything that would hinder your playing experience, even if you are younger and the PS2 is not something you grew up with. Once you finish the tutorial, shit hits the fan and people start invading your land. It is at this point that Red, you, or the main character, decides he is completely fine becoming a mass murderer. There are dozens of men coming in waves, and Red has no qualms getting blood on his hands as fast as possible. This is actually a nice way to introduce combat because it doesn't hold your hand and the situation feels dire. You start to get a real feel for combat at this point, and you realize bullets don't travel super fast in the game, and you have to lead your shots in a certain way. While maybe not being the most realistic, it does make the combat feel unique. You also notice a couple of other things. First, the enemies in this game are massive bullet sponges. You can essentially go through entire clips, but unless you hit them in the head, they probably aren't going down. Which leads me to point number 2. Headshots are badass in this game. You get this super satisfying flash when you land them, and they are immediately kills on enemies. While being a little unfair in a sense, it does reward you for being better at shooting as the game progresses. After dealing with hordes of baddies, you come to realize your ma and pa did not quite make it. You are then introduced to the main villain of the story, who isn't immediately known. He just looks like some commander dude. You end up blowing his entire arm off with your pa's special revolver picked up from the flame. You hide right by your house somehow, even though there are 2 dudes there watching you, and most likely could have easily found you, but who knows. I guess then there wouldn't have been a game otherwise. The next part of the game is a time skip, and Red is a full-grown bounty hunter. You meet with the merchant who offers you some things, and thus brings up one of the biggest problems with the game in general. You're constantly offered all these things, but can only see a narrow list of items. You never know when you should be saving your money or spending it. The case here is to just buy things as an introduction, but it becomes a real issue later in the game. Once you make your purchases, Red wastes absolutely no time before he goes off, ending people who simply do not talk to him the right way. You're then introduced to the cover system, which is pretty advanced at the time. The only issue is that it really isn't all that great. Actually being able to cover behind something works better than you might think, but it is slow and pretty much makes things worse. There is a bad delay when you actually get to shoot, and your enemies always seem faster. In my experience, running and gunning is always better. After killing a bunch of people, and get used to that, you're introduced to yet another mechanic called Deadeye. This is actually a really nice mechanic and the calling card for the game, honestly. It slows down time and lets you target multiple parts of one enemy, and also a bunch of enemies if they are close by. You can line up headshots with this Deadeye, and your mastery of it is key to getting good at this game, because later on down the road it gets hard as hell. The best part is that these mechanics are really important. So many times in video games it gives you all these enhanced features that you end up throwing out of the window because certain strategies become better. Not in Red Dead Revolver. You better get good at this shit or else you are donezo. After that, you end up massacring the rest of this little village, and I can't tell you how nostalgic it was to hear,
I'm gonna make mincemeat out of you.
Again. Tim, Oaf, and George have massive balls and literally charge you. I was trying to play it safe and take cover, but these guys wanted blood, and they do not care about running at you head first. By the way, 2 super important tips about the game that you should know. Triangle reloads weapons, and pressing X while you're aiming does a barrel roll. The game simply does not tell you, and that is really important information. I did not figure that out till much later. After killing those 3, you're rewarded on the next screen depending on how you did. I like this system a lot because the benefits can be really important, like extra health or more Deadeye. Just another incentive to be better at the game, which is awesome. You take the bounties to the next town and these people kill your dog. You know what that means? Time to massacre everybody. Red does not fuck around. This guy wants bodies in bags, man. At this point in the game, you spend less than 1 minute before you're killing at least 5+ people. It's insane. After ending an entire population, it's time to leave no survivors, and the game shows off another game mechanic which becomes a big part of the gameplay on a lot of iconic moments called Showdown. It is a cowboy-ass scene for quick draw dueling. It is difficult to learn, and I never actually got the science down. Still, the atmosphere is amazing, and it helps make the game stand out. Turns out there are actually a couple of stragglers, and Red knows only one form of communication: death. The sheriff is taken hostage, and for some reason when you help release him, he tries punching the guy who is 10 times his size until he is eventually taken again. Now that that guy is dead, the sheriff's daughter asks you for your help to get him a doctor. It really puts things in perspective. I mean, you literally just killed every single person in this village, so what was law enforcement doing there? Who was he even protecting, and why was he living there? After this mission, you get a chance to buy a shotgun. Again, the system is flawed, but for another reason. You have to gear yourself up before every mission, but no earthly clue what the next mission is going to look like. You might need a long-range weapon, you might not. The next train scene gives you a false sense of illusion. You actually get to talk to people, giving you more than a minute before raining hell upon everyone in your vicinity.
Best general store in the territories in Brimstone. I should know. I own it.
Howdy, gunslinger. You'll see plenty more of your kind in Brimstone.
As you might guess, the peace doesn't last very long, and people try to rob the train. Although if you're going to make a Western game, you damn well better make a train robbery. The initial quick draw scene is actually awesome, and a good sense of tension is created. This mission is pretty fun overall, but my favorite part is the woman who screams frantically, but also gives up mission critical information in the process.
Why is the train speeding up? Something must have happened to the engineer!
The delayed jumping controls can get frustrating at certain points, but nothing too crazy. The mission ends with some of the worst sections of the game. You are defending the train and often stand there for seconds on end, just waiting for the next wave of mindless enemies to come. You also realize the shooting is not perfect. You could place some perfect headshots and nothing will happen. Eventually you get to Brimstone and thus introduce you to the open world hub that you'll be in for the rest of the game. Some shops you can go into, like the gun store or the saloon, others stay out of business for some reason because others don't even bother. The best part of the town is that it feels alive. You can talk to people about current events, so that it feels less like robots.
Hey, you look like you've traveled around these parts. I heard you was the one that saved Sheriff O'Grady's life.
There's also a newsstand that always announces missions that just happened. It's super charming.
Read all about it. Governor announces 6th annual battle royale.
You'll eventually make your way to the sheriff's office, where he'll give you the main missions for the game. This is also one of the weaker parts of the game in my opinion. These bounties never go far past, hey, this dude is bad, go kill him, making it feel a little empty.
You might want to start with Pig Josh. He's one crazy outlaw and circus freak.
When you get to this destroyed town, you're introduced to a really big side character. He's an old English bounty hunter who feels like he doesn't really fit in with the times despite it being this Old West cowboy era. He really reminds me of the people from We Happy Few. Before you can release him, you end up killing a bunch of people wearing clown masks. It is bizarre and pretty scary. After freeing Jack, you get your first opportunity to use a Gatling gun. It has the worst controls in the game for no reason. You would think handling something with that kind of firepower would be difficult to maneuver, but the slightest movement makes the thing go all over the place. It is so hard to hit, let alone kill any enemy with it, considering they are bullet sponges anyways. Next is the main guy he came to collect for. Again hearing,
You gonna blow up real good, cowboy.
is so memorable for me. The fight is an absolute nightmare. The music stops and you can never tell where Pig Josh is. It's actually one of the more memorable parts of the game because of how eerie it is. Despite his size, he will outrun you and fuck you up. The next mission you go into is actually from Jack itself, which is a great change of pace. He's a double revolver thing going on, and his Deadeye has a different mode. He has this badass machine gun type of thing. It is awesome, and again makes the game stand out for me. It makes characters feel unique and fun to use for different reasons. It changes your playstyle a little bit, making the gameplay feel fresh as a result. The villain has this potion thing and bizarrely sticks out like a sore thumb. Mysticism isn't a huge thing in Red Dead Revolver, so it's strange, although I guess cool, to see it here. One of the mini-bosses is Atlas, who is one of the dumbest enemies in the game. You can shoot him, and half a second later, he simply forgets about it. The mission is actually quite easy, but different enough to be fun. When you go to the sheriff for the next mission, you get an even shorter explanation. In a few seconds you get, Lady Bad, go kill her.
If you don't mind hunting down a woman, if you can call her a woman.
On the bright side, you also get to buy twin revolvers yourself, which is pretty cool. This mission is extremely forgettable. Enemies are generic and the scenery matches it. It doesn't really have a place in the story, other than being a side mission, so it's unfortunate it is necessary to progress the story. The cover system really sticks out like a sore thumb in this mission. You'll regularly be able to get behind cover, but when you go to aim, nothing happens. The delay in the process of aiming is annoying as well. Your rifle also gets in the way of your crosshairs too. There is a point in the mission where you jump across a bridge and end up in a showdown duel. You can't even see the guys as you move there, further adding to the idea that this level was shoehorned in at the last second. The boss fight with Bad Bessie is nothing short of annoying. She runs around faster than you can aim, and the only way to beat her is when she gets stupid and rushes you with the whip. After you take care of her, little time is wasted with the sheriff for the next one. This time you get to know the guy at least is a mass murderer. Red isn't far behind in my opinion. This mission is a little more exciting, if not straightforward. The town is a lot more stylized and it feels a little less monotonous, especially later on when you get to the gravesite. The boss here is named Mr. Black, and it flirts more with the mysticism side of the game, like the potion guy. He's rumored to be dead, but the coffin on his back holds a Gatling gun. It isn't the greatest thing in the world, but certainly more thought out than Betty. He is pretty easy to beat as long as you keep moving, which is the dominant strategy of the game regardless. These two missions are really the low point in the game. Considering they aren't insufferable, it feels okay, but they were added to pad out the time length of the game without a doubt. When you go to collect the money on your bounty, even though the game already gave it to you, the sheriff tells you that the money from the bank hasn't come in yet, so you have to go take it up with the bank owner. When you go to the bank, you end up walking in the middle of a heated discussion about some farmland. You're also introduced into some premier 8-bit ass. PS2 games, despite having graphic limitations, were just as horny as today's landscape. I remember those old James Bond games I used to play. They wanted to get some hormones going. It ends up jumping to you playing as Annie, which again is a refreshing feel. When you get back to her farm, you see people are invading it and destroying her land. Her Deadeye power is a massive shotgun blast type of thing. The only annoying part of this level is when you get to the barn. I died the first time because I didn't realize there were people on the second floor, which honestly makes no sense because it is actively burning down. It just feels like bad game design. The rest of the level is pretty straightforward and finishes off with a showdown with a couple of dudes riding buffaloes. Red conveniently shows up after you kill the last enemy, asking about a gold mine which is connected to his father's death, and Annie points him in the right direction. Red lets Annie know about this dual showdown in Brimstone, but we'll get to that when the time comes. It's some real psychopathic shit. Red ends up back at the saloon and overheard someone talking about a one-armed man. When they refuse to tell him, Red goes absolutely ballistic and decides it's time to commit mass murder again. This part is a bit hard to get used to, but it's an old-fashioned bar fight, so it does a great job of changing the pace of gameplay. There doesn't seem to be any good strategy for this level, it just kind of comes down to luck. Guys take forever to die, and it would be maddening to hit a guy a couple times just for them to get up and pick up a girl for no reason. Just stab guys and try to pick up as many bottles as possible. When this part is complete, one of the ladies directs you to another room, where of course it's time to kill everybody. These two ladies who appear to work for the saloon take out rifles to kill you. At first I thought they were friendly because why would they want to kill you? So I got shot in the back when I first tried to do this part. It really adds to the narrative that Red himself is quite insane and these ladies were probably just scared. Nevertheless, it's time to take them out with absolutely zero remorse. The boss of this stage is called Sam. He's literally like Rhino from the Spider-Man PS1 game.
Hey, that is expensive equipment.
At one point, when I ran out of tables, I thought I didn't shoot him enough when he was in that disgruntled state. I refused to let him kill me because that is shite game design, so I went to hit the reset button. When I did that, it took me all the way back to the bar scene. Bruh. How can that be? I obviously just wanted to restart that part. There should have been a go back to the last checkpoint button. That is such a harsh penalty. So for me, it was back to cracking skulls with bottles. After a while, I finally got back to fighting Sam, and I ran into the same issue. There were no tables left, and I was left to run around endlessly until I found out the dude is actually dumb enough to run right into the entrance of the stage. After you defeat Sam and the sheriff comes to the saloon, he was like, "Hey dude, what the fuck are you doing?" Which makes a lot of sense. Locked up, Red asked the sheriff about the one-armed man he heard about that started the bar fight, and surprisingly, he has good intel on the dude. So, instead of killing upwards of 20 people, Red simply could have inquired to the guy who he had known all along. The more I think about it, if he wanted to find out who killed his parents, he should actually try asking people. He was just going town to town killing people, which really doesn't help his cause. I would imagine that criminals would probably know more about the people who kill his folks. The sheriff starts to go over the story about the US cavalry going south of the border. You actually get to play as this General Diego, which eventually does tie into Red's family. You see the dude from the beginning who shot you with his arm clean off too. They are preparing for some kind of battle. From this point, the difficulty of the game ramps up tenfold and the story goes deep. The hardest part of this level is that the sense of direction quickly goes out of the window. The landscape is designed so you have cannons on one side and the enemy is on the other. The only problem is that there are dudes everywhere. They constantly appear from behind you and can drain your health quickly. When you kill enough guys, you then start a cannon fight where the cannons start shooting at you and you have to shoot flares back to start blowing them up. All the while, more hordes of enemies come your way and they shoot you from the back immediately. It makes no damn sense. It's a beginner's trap. When you eventually die, you find out this level is hell and you start all the way back at the beginning. So it's back to shooting the first wave of enemies, getting back to shooting the cannons with flares before then going through the same cutscene again, showing more guys coming your way, all on one life bar. Some enemies do give health, but you're normally so far away because you're trying to take out as many as possible before they storm you. Also, some of the cutscenes are fairly abrupt, so if you're trying to run to it in time, it'll teleport you to another area away from the health. As it turns out, the cannon battle is a bunch of baloney. Diego says screw it, and you decide to blow up the bridge. Those cannon numbers mean nothing. You are tasked with defending Juan and Alonzo while they set charges. Their life bars are minuscule in comparison to everyone else, and on top of that, you have to survive too. After they both died, you guessed it, back to the damn beginning of the level. I mean, geez, how harsh can this level possibly be? In recap, you have to A, take out the initial wave of enemies. B, take out enough cannons to trigger the next wave of enemies. C, take out that group of enemies. And D, defend Juan and Alonzo long enough for them to set charges. All while rogue cannon fire can nail you at any moment. My best advice when you get to the bomb planting section is to disregard your own safety because Juan and Alonzo will be dead before you know it. You just have to pray enemies drop enough health to get you through the storm. Eventually the bridge does explode and apparently it won you the battle, although normally that is a tactic to admit defeat. It is a way to stop your opponent from advancing. Also, the conversation at the beginning of the level suggested things weren't going so well.
Generalissimo, you're not planning to take on the entire Yankee army.
You don't expect me to answer a stupid question like that. Prepare the artillery.
Anyways, one of the dudes from the battle is brought forward and claims to have found a gold mine. He owns a 50-50 split in said mine and his partner ends up being Red's dad. The dude sells him out, which is understandable because, they were threatening to kill him. This is the only time you ever see that guy after this. Now back to the modern day. Red goes after a supply carriage in this remote-ass town. The level overall is pretty damn boring. I guess the idea of the area is that it's expansive, but that is only interesting if there are things to explore while you're there. Enemies are so scattered you'll end up walking aimlessly around for no reason. I even did a little bit of exploring, hoping to find an Easter egg of some sort, but came across nothing. Before long, the stagecoach makes his way into the area, and instead of running away, conveniently does a slow, methodical circling pattern. Again, this points out how ridiculously large this map is for no reason. The stagecoach also has more health than any other boss in the game for added flavor. Red goes to inspect the burned down trailer and is karate chopped by the one-armed general and followed by Diego. Why they don't kill him or even question him is completely unknown. Flash forward to the next mission, and it turns out Red's family is deeply connected to the surrounding Native Americans. His Native American mother, who was only briefly seen at the beginning of the game, seemed to live a very different life, but nonetheless, Shadow Wolf comes to his rescue and mentions Red as his cousin. The game then tries to shoehorn stealth that persists over the next couple of missions. Luckily, it is optional, but the stealth mechanics that are there are really flawed. There's no real incentive to be stealthy and would only prolong the game in reality. Shadow Wolf is equipped with a bow and arrow, which does promote you to be less gung-ho about your enemy interactions. It is also cool to have a different weapon type in the game. The creators of the game really did care about creating variety. While it isn't executed very well in a lot of areas, the fact that they put that kind of attention in the game does matter to me. Going back to the stealth mechanics, the Shadow Wolf stuff is too painfully obvious. I mean, it is almost comical. It's like oopsie doopsie, I sure do hope that no Native American attacks me with my back turned to this fire while my fellow soldiers sleep. A major issue with this level is navigation. It is really difficult to know if you're going in the right direction at any time. It is pretty easy to get turned around. At times, I felt downright lucky. Don't even bother looking at the map. It is complete and utter nonsense. The main boss of this level truthfully makes absolutely no sense. The thing's name is Grizzly, and it's an anamorphic character. It is really juxtaposed from Diego's guys, and what it is doing here is a mystery. It acts like an animal, and even roars. Grizzly is also one of the stranger bosses in the game. When it jumps to the ground, you are absolutely fucked. For some reason, Shadow Wolf cannot run and always moves in a semi-hunched position. When Grizzly comes for you on the ground, just accept your death. My best advice is to stand behind a rock, because the thing has an intelligence of an ant. When you kill him, Shadow goes to find Red, who recently befriended a soldier who says he will go bring help back from Brimstone. The next level again tries to force the player into half thought out stealth mechanics. The idea is that you only have a knife, but as soon as you kill the first person, they drop a gun and the ammo is never a problem after that. I truthfully did try to play stealthy in the beginning, but the first enemy inconspicuously turned around, so stealth was out of the window from that point on for the entire mission. Considering how many enemies are in the area, and that some of them have critical keys that drop when they die, the point of being stealthy makes little to no sense. All things considered, this part of the game isn't too bad, and the close quarter nature of combat shakes things up enough to feel exciting. After finding all these keys, you end up in the main shaft area and have to fight Ted and Tony. Ted turns out to be one tough son of a bitch, and at times it feels impossible to hit him even at point blank range. The guy rarely misses, and I don't even have a good strategy for this part. I think the worst part of this section is that it truly highlights how clunky the cover controls are. You'll be placed behind a barrier that the game seemingly encourages you to do, only to find out that your enemy can still hit you. Also, that 1 second delay before going out of cover gives Ted plenty of time to murk you. When you finally kill them, Red uses their dead bodies to break out of the mine. Pretty badass, I guess. The next part of the mission by far is the worst in the game. The escaped soldier who is going to town to find some help jumps on the stage wagon full of dynamite, because yes. The entire mission is just you standing there shooting waves of people. That's it, and it goes on forever. This mission serves as one of the harshest ways to move the plot forward, because once you finish, you learn the governor is in on the whole mess. At this point, the conspiracy cannot run much deeper. Luckily, the next mission goes back to some real cowboy shit. The music here really helps get you in the mood as you face improbable odds. You'll likely die a few times because the layout of the level is a little confusing. You run around like a jackass while Gatling guns and swarms of enemies come out of every corner. In a bid to find cover, I jumped over this ledge where an enemy was. Turns out, this leads you to the path around the entire map. Pretty clever, I have to say, considering the player is naturally drawn towards that area to survive. Eventually, I found myself at a dead end. I even walked all the way back, only to discover my path back was blocked. I finally realized in the rummage of the blocked out wall is a big barrel of TNT. Nice. When you finally get to the top, it's time to take out all the enemies below. I was then reminded that the Gatling gun has the worst controls in the game. You'll be flying over enemies who are bullet sponges anyways, all while having virtually no cover. Enemies also flank you from your side, despite killing them all on the way up. I had to restart this level so many damn times, and you know it starts you all the way back at the beginning. That means you have to circle around every single time you die. I thought we figured out the whole checkpoint thing after the NES, but I guess not. Eventually, Darren, who killed your ma and pa, shows up and has Shadow Wolf hostage. What feels like it should be the final boss comes pretty early. The Gatling gun actually comes in handy to start this one out. Somehow this guy can take 200 plus rounds of ammunition and only have it drain a quarter of his life. Quite impressive. When you go to the ground level to confront him, you find out he has a back cannon. The logistics of how that works will never be known. For the most part, he is one of the easiest bosses in the game. He just stands there like an oaf. You can just keep peeping corners and shooting him. Shadow Wolf dies from plot disease and encourages you to chase after the man who started it all, kind of. You end up chasing after Diego on horse, and the controls are pretty damn awkward. This horse is able to run faster than a train somehow. All you have to do is jump on it and get the ball rolling, but for some reason, that is an extremely difficult task. It was just a constant barrage of invisible walls.
Get up there! Get up there! Get the fuck up there!
You have to decouple the train, and the only way to do that is to get past this Gatling gun on top. I wish I had a piece of advice for doing this, but I just don't. Just rhino bulldoze your way through those bullets and shoot that lever. Eventually some random dude with a railroad cart comes flying by and conveniently has a Gatling gun attached to it. You shoot the train's engine, and finally you get to fight Diego. Diego is an absolute maniac and runs at you head on. It's as if the bastard knows his life bar is a little higher than yours at this point and wants to push the game mechanics to its absolute limits. Luckily, when you get shot you're not stunned, but that's not the case for him. Just shoot him enough times wherever, and he goes down. The next part of the game really blows my mind. The town is hosting a dueling showdown, and a hell of a lot of people join this thing. The point of the tournament is to determine who the fastest draw in town is. It's an actual death match. One winner. You know the friends he made along the way? Well, they are all in it too. The attitude they take going into this fight is way too casual.
Well, don't get in my way. I'm gonna sign up for this battle royale. If the governor thinks he can scare me off my own land with hired goons.
There are even townfolk who cheer on the event like it's Monday Night Football. The first couple of stages are easy. You also see that your friends win their duels. It's actually kind of hilarious that Annie is the only one using a massive rifle to take part in the event while everyone is just using a pistol. Through pure plot armor alone, none of the important characters have to match up with one another. When you kill the second guy, it takes you to the bar for the night. For no reason.
You won't win tomorrow. I saw you today and you were as slow as a snail with two bad knees.
There's nothing to do other than to run up to your room and get some shut-eye. The next day the tournament starts back up. The sheriff's introduction for Kelly says he is a 3-time champion and current champion. While considering the alternative to winning is actual death, I would imagine that this guy won last year. Before you take on Kelly, the sheriff is taken inside and the governor takes over the games. The governor says everyone sucks, so this will be the final round, and the winner will be determined right here, right now. Honestly, that is probably the most sane thing anyone in the game has ever done. While his intentions are bad behind the scenes, this act of mercy is the only one seen in the entire game. After you defeat Kelly, kind of, the mayor pulls out your pa's pistol on you. As you might imagine, Red is not cool with that. Somehow, Kelly is not dead, despite taking 4 shots to the chest, and gets up to commit a massacre on the town. He is one squirmy son of a gun and accurate with his shots. When you inevitably die doing this part, guess what? Yep, it's back to beating him in the showdown. Not only can he kill you, but if he takes out civilians, it's also game over. Back to the showdown once again. There is no easy way to beat him. You just have to hope he gets distracted shooting at people enough to get some clean shots on him. The 3 friends then meet up around the sheriff and reconcile after being ready to kill one another just 5 minutes earlier. The sheriff points the group to the governor's mansion, thus getting the player ready for one of the hardest levels in PS2 history. Let me tell you, this mansion is more fortified than most military bases. The first section is not the hardest in the world. Just defeat a bunch of bad guys and snipe the dude up top named Oswald. Then Randy comes out, and he isn't too bad either. The next section is where things really start to go awry. You'll soon realize that Jack and Annie have no regard for their health. They will stand and take shots all day. Caring for these two quickly becomes a pain in the ass, because if they die, it's game over, and you know what that means, starting the level all over again.
No. God damn it! 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 God damn it!
Jack comes up with the genius idea of lockpicking the front door of the mansion. This section of the level will actually drive you insane. You have to A, protect Jack, who is completely defenseless, B, protect Annie, who seems like she is actively trying to commit assisted suicide, C, take out special enemies hellbent on killing you and Jack, and D, somehow survive the entire ordeal. You will experience the longest 3 minutes of your life. You'll die, then Annie will die, then Jack will die, and then you'll die again. It's maddening. The only solace you will find is that this part is a checkpoint, the first in the entire game. The fact that they did this makes other levels even more frustrating. There is no easy way to get past this part. I have no idea how I was able to do it when I did. Just hope you can last long enough and get lucky that Annie can survive on her own. Pray that one of the bosses drops health. That is all I can say.
The only way to do it is to fucking do it.
Once you're inside, it does not get much easier. The biggest downfall of this section is that there's so many corners where enemies sneak around. You'll eventually run too fast into a room and get shot from 3 different people. You may not die, but now your health is so low, you know you're eventually going to die not that long after. After every single part, you'll get to a new area for the same process to repeat. You will not know where the enemy is, you'll get shot cheaply a bunch of times, you'll die, and restart. Having to remember where every single enemy is a horrible way to put difficulty into a game. After making your way through the mansion, you eventually meet up with Buffalo, the soldier that helped you earlier. Why they kept him alive is unknown. You run into the governor's office only to be confronted by his head honcho. It turns into a quick draw duel and exposes one of the bigger flaws in the game. Here's the thing. You're going to fail this duel many times because it is way harder than any of the other ones in the game by a large margin. When you die, all you want to do is try again. You'll click X a bunch of times to skip ahead to the duel, only to realize that skipping the cutscene gives you no time to actually do the duel. After finally getting past the dude, you and Buffalo confront the mayor in a final showdown. As he tries to set some charges, the mayor sets his own dynamite and absolutely yeets this heavy piece of metal on top of him. Instead of asking for help, he tells you to get going, which is not something I would have said. It looks extremely painful. This last part is a bunch of bullshit. After hurting enough, the governor takes on a cutscene, and you can tell it's going to come down to a quick time draw. You know how the rest of the game really preps you for that moment? Well, they throw that shit by the wayside. He jumps your ass, and when he kills you, it's not back to the duel, you gotta defeat him again. Now that you know it's coming, killing him isn't all that bad. After that, Buffalo turns out fine somehow, and Red gives Annie the money so she can keep her ranch. Then Red walks away like a badass.
It's about the Mets, baby. Love the Mets. All right, baby. Let's go. Get a home run, baby. Love the Mets. Let's go, Mets.
Whew, what a journey. It feels like I complained a whole lot during this review, and yet my main takeaway from the game is that it is still fun and definitely worth a try if you've never played it before. The main character is awesome, and the gameplay is satisfying if you get good at it. As I got older, games became more about set pieces and less about the difficulty. Call of Duty's regenerating health system really seemed to cause an evolution in video games that changed people's perception on good game design. Considering this game came out the same year as Half-Life 2, GTA San Andreas, Halo 2, World of Warcraft, and The Sims 2, it's easy to realize how Red Dead Revolver slipped into the cracks of relative obscurity. Still, it will always hold a special place in my heart, and I hope this review inspires a few people to dust off their PlayStation 2s and take a trip down memory lane. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Next time, we'll take a look at another PS2 Western I used to play in one of the most underrated video games of all time. Until then, see you guys for another episode of Retro Video Game Reviews.